All right, what's up, everybody? I am super pumped. I'm always pumped, but I'm a little extra pumped because I am getting to do a podcast with a true American hero and a total badass. What's up, Dave Burke?
Hey man, thanks for having me,
Y-
Dave.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you. So, for those of you who don't know who Dave is, he is the Chief Development Officer for Echelon Front, retired military Marine military guy, Top Gun instructor. I first heard his name when he did an interview or a podcast with Jocko Willink, who I've interviewed once and talk about all the time because I just love that book, Extreme Ownership. I don't know, I'm sure you agree with me, Dave, but I do think it is the number one leadership book of our time, and it is a leadership book that will be talked about 100 years from now.
I totally agree. It is seminal to this generation, and I think its content will last a long time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's going to last forever. As I told you when we were prepping for this, I'm currently writing a book called Know Your Code. And, the code that I've developed I didn't invent any of it. I mean, I'm pretty into Stoicism. One of the first books that had the most influence in my life was the Children's Bible. But lots of the things that go into my code, it's like I heard somewhere else, extreme ownership. Like when I heard Jocko and Leaf share that, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm into that. I believe in that. But I guess I would love to know, you've got a book coming out. You're a leadership consultant now. What are some of the things that are part of your code that just really drive you as a leader and that you try to bring to the clients that you serve at Echelon Front?
Yeah, you said a lot there, and I couldn't agree with you more. And if you had Leif and Jocko on right now, they would be the first to tell you that concept of personal responsibility, they didn't invent that. And you know that these things have been around for a long time. And I think what separates that was not the uniqueness of the message per se, but how it was crafted and delivered. And to be quite honest, you were alluding to something in there that the way they wrote Extreme Ownership resonated, will continue to resonate. And to be quite frank, had that book not been written, I don't think I would have left the Marine Corps when and how I did and ended up inside of Echelon Front as the Chief Development Officer. Because one of the things I recognize how what that book did for me is you have to capture the things that you live by, that code that you have. And I think I spent a lot of my time, certainly early in my career, kind of meandering way through my leadership space without really recognizing that if there's really important things to create your own personal code, you got to write those things down. And the things that we share with our clients, the things that I share with people in my life are things like humility, ownership, teamwork. And to be honest, Dave, like it sounds obvious, right? Like those are important key pillars of behaviors that should be central to our lives. But if you don't write those things down or really truly contemplate or capture them, you can realize that you're not following them all the time because they haven't really been codified. So writing a book helped with that. But to be totally clear, extreme ownership set me on a path of not just living by that, but also recognizing how important it was to understand that you were trying to live by that. It's a really powerful thing. And I think that's part of the reason why it's resonated so well.
Yeah. So by the way, you mentioned that you don't know that you would have left your life in military had it not been for that. Like unpack that a little bit. I'm just personally curious to hear that story.
Well, I definitely knew I was leaving the Marine Corps. I had made the decision at a certain phase, and I had been in the Marine Corps for 23 years. I had been selected for colonel. I had been selected for command. I was going to go back to fly the F-35 as a colonel and command, the biggest F-35 unit that we had. It was a big thing, and I had gotten to a place where I realized I wanted to do something different. And it just so happens that coincided with Leif reaching out to me saying his company was doing, book had come out, they were starting to do well, and they wanted me to consider being part of that, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity. But had it not been for that, I think I would have taken a much more traditional career path, maybe gotten into industry or something. I don't think I had the full grasp that the experiences that I had in the Marine Corps could be used to be valuable and beneficial to other people. And that's what Leif and Jocko did. They took the lessons from their career, and to be quite frank, the shortfalls, the mistakes, the errors, the things that we learned, the hard lessons, and those apply well beyond the battlefield. They apply well beyond an airplane. And they revealed to me that I might be able to help with them carry a message that can be positively impactful well beyond the military. And I don't think if it wasn't for them, I would have understood that or seen the opportunity in that. And I'm super grateful that they revealed that to me. But that's really a byproduct of the work that they did. and seeing that what we learned and the mistakes that we made and the lessons of leadership in the military apply everywhere in every aspect of life. And that's really what Echelon Front is doing now with those lessons. And I get to be a part of that. It's an awesome experience.
Yeah, no, you guys got a great crew. I mean, Andrew Paul
Yeah.
helped put the two of us together, and that's why we're here. Shout out to Andrew Paul.
What's
He,
up,
he
Andrew?
was he was also the one that helped me get the interview with Jocko. I would have never had that interview. I'm going to put that down below in links. It's actually Andrew and I together. We interviewed Jocko for I think 30 minutes, and then Jocko had a jump, and it was me and Leaf. So guys, link down below for that. So here's my question to you, like coming out of military, jumping into Echelon Front, just from your experience, just what you brought to the table, what are some of the principles? Like obviously Jocko and Leaf, extreme ownership is the North Star.
Yeah.
I mean, they brought other things like, default aggressive.
Totally.
I can't remember all like when I read that book, I look back at it, it's just like a code. This was their code. What would be a couple of the North Star concepts that they either already had them or you brought them to Echelon Front?
Oh man. Well, I think a lot of what we do and what we have built from, to include in my book, is built upon the foundation they laid. And obviously, extreme ownership is a cornerstone of that. Extreme ownership is the mindset of I am responsible for the things that are affecting me and the people around me. I can't place the blame elsewhere. It doesn't help me solve problems or make things better. But embedded in that too, if you think about it, I love the word that you use, the codes that go along, the things that they codified, was the leadership behaviors and actions that you have to take. It's not just enough to think that you are responsible. There's things you have to do. That middle section of the book, section 2, chapters 5, 6, 7, 8 of Extreme Ownership, codify the leadership behaviors. We call them the laws of combat. And Jocko really built that out in his experience training SEALs, and then realized that translated really well to the private sector, to personal lives, what have you, is what we call cover and move simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralize can. Those four things. And so everything that we teach is really rooted in the mindset of extreme ownership and the behaviors of those four laws. What I've maybe contributed, if you really want to call it that, but really just been a participant in that, I cannot take credit that I have somehow created these things, is on top of that, in the book that is really the third book in a series of books. They wrote the first two, Extreme Ownership, and the second book, the concept of dichotomy, which is balance. The concept of dichotomy leadership is we embedded our core beliefs that we have as Echelon Front, but really think all people should have. And first and foremost, that every single human being is a leader. Every person. And it doesn't matter your role, doesn't matter your title. You don't need people working for you in the org chart. Every human being is a leader. And that first core belief is central to why we do what we do, but also empowers people to recognize that when we're talking about leadership, it applies to them. It's not your boss. It doesn't have to be the CEO or manager. It applies to everyone. And we believe that the second element of that is that leadership isn't just a professional pursuit. It's not just how we do in our jobs. It's at home. It's in our communities. Obviously, we know it's at work, but it's also within ourselves, which sometimes is the hardest part, is just leading ourselves to do the right thing. And those are two of the four critical core beliefs that I codified in our book. And the other two, very quickly, is that every problem is a leadership problem. Don't look at it in any other way. And the great thing about seeing every problem as a leadership problem is that you can solve things through leadership. And then lastly is that leadership is a skill that can be taught, which means if, Dave, you have someone in your life you admire and hold up on a pedestal as a good leader, you don't have to look at that and say, wow, what lucky that guy. I wish I had those things. You can go, oh, he learned those things, which means I can learn them too. And if you take those four core beliefs together and then embed the behaviors and actions and other principles that we teach, you now have an audience who really is, everybody can go, oh, this is about me. I can learn to be a better leader. I need to lead my way through problems, and I can. Now you give them a skill that is life altering in every phase of their life, which is our goal of Echelon Front and the goal of the book.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to read the book. So by the way, guys, pre-order it. It is is it the need to lead?
It is the need to lead.
The need to
Little Top
lead.
Gun nod there, but it's the truth. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, a little play off of the need for speed.
indeed.
And I remember that movie Top Gun, if I recall from the podcast with Jocko, was a real inspiration for you, becoming a Top Gun pilot.
100%. I watched that movie when I was 14. Picture being 14, seeing that on the big screen, thinking, I want to do that. And lo and behold, I mean, that's the path I
Boom.
went down. Yeah.
Yeah, look at you now, man. Well, that's awesome. So let's talk about to me, one of the North Stars in leadership and just success, like one of the master codes. I think I told you in prep, I first heard this from the words OODA Loop, and if you're watching this right now and you know what OODA Loop is, I bet hearing it from Dave Berke will be valuable for you. If you're watching this right now and you've never heard those letters and that word, this can be game changing
Yeah.
because like when I first heard James Murphy, the author of Flawless Execution, say those words, I think it was 2005. It really changed me as a leader. Like it gave me a bullseye. Would you mind I'm not even going to say what the word means because I think you can do it justice better than I can. But like give anyone listening to this a little bit of a master class on what is the OODA loop?
Well, I'll try to do it quickly, but first and foremost, when we talk about OODA, that's just an acronym, OODA. And to your point, Dave, like if you haven't heard this, you might have a familiarity and just not realize it. You should just Google it. It is essentially four things in part of a process. And what's really interesting, if you think about the origins of OODA Loop, it really came from a fighter pilot. So if you're wondering why that guy you just referenced and why I have some sense of OODA Loop, this process of decision making, it really was codified by someone named John Boyd. And there's a book, fantastic book, it's been out for a while about him and that concept of OODA loop, which stands for observe, orient, decide, act. What he recognized is that the faster and the more effectively you make decisions, the more likely you are going to be successful, especially in environments where it might appear that you have some sort of disadvantage. And the analytical process of making decisions and coming to the right conclusion and being open to feedback is really, really important. And when we think about OODA loop and decision making, it's really a tool to recognize that the process of deciding what to do and taking action on it is not just your gut instinct. It's not just your individual thoughts. It's all the information that's out there, the orientation of the information. It's the collaboration of the people around you to decide, and then the action that it takes. And then most importantly is the feedback you get. And so when we teach OODA Loop, we certainly break it down to its four component parts: observe, orient, decide, act. But the key elements, and listen, there's a lot more complexity. You could talk about this stuff for people get master's thesis on this stuff. So we're really simplifying it for this is you can get really good at making decisions by being open-minded to what's going on around you and being willing and open-minded to the feedback that you might have missed some steps in the process, you might have missed some things here, but if you get good at observing and taking feedback and making adjustments, you get better and faster and more efficient at doing that. And all of a sudden, you can get really good at making important decisions at really critical times, and you can be successful despite really heavy odds against you if you apply that principle of OODA loop decision making.
That was a beautiful description. By the way, I think you guys have some type of online class
We
at
totally
Echelon
do.
Front that
Yeah.
will really take it to the next level. Would you mind describing that just for anyone that like wants to
Yeah.
like, okay, I really want to understand this. I want to master it. I want to improve my ability to OODA loop in life. Where would they go to go deeper on that?
Well, I appreciate you asking. I mean, the simplest way is if you just go to academy.echelonfront.com. Our company, Echelon Front, has an online, web-based academy where we have all sorts of courses. Everything from the book Extreme Ownership, Jocko and Leif teach that online. Everything from the book Dichotomy of Leadership, they teach that, and a whole host of courses that we have created for this online platform. Everything from, being a new leader to be a middle manager, being a CEO, building relationships and whatnot. And one of the courses that is online on our academy is called the OODA Loop. And you'll be shocked to know that I give that course. And it really is more extensive. It's much longer than the few minutes I just gave. It's probably 40 to 45 minutes. And it goes into more detail of what they mean. And then most importantly, how it applies so you know how to use it in your personal life. And even then, that course is awesome, gets really good reviews because it's very helpful. I want your listeners and your watchers to know too, like it can be much more extensive. And so your pursuit of understanding of OODA, a great place to start would be that course. And then there's even more to it beyond that. When we work with clients and we give our annual leadership conference a muster, we are always talking about the decision-making loop and the leadership loop associated with how a leader makes decisions and how hard that can be without a process built into it.
How much is the course? So if an individual loan officer is watching this, they want to go sign up and get it, do you happen to know?
I don't. It's
All
not that
right.
much. I can look it up,
But
but
don't worry about it.
yeah.
Guys. We will have a link down below. Go check it out. I don't think it's crazy.
It's
Uh,
not crazy. It's affordable, and I would say like the investment is well worth it. It can be, and we talked about this before. Like when OODA becomes part of your life, it is a game changer. It's a game changer. So
yeah.
whatever the very nominal investment is, the impact that can be really significant.
Yeah, and while it is a term that came from the military, and by the way, is still like I had the honor of doing. I do a little with a ruck vest. I do a walk every morning. And Sean Herrera, when he was in town, he did a loan for a current active duty SEAL team leader, and I was walking and talking with this guy, and I was kind of practicing my know your code interview, and I was
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like, hey, what are some of the core principles? And he was just like, OODA loop, like it's everything. He's like, I'm OODA looping everything at all times, and then I asked him, I go like, if there was like a number two pillar code, and he's like, there's just nothing. Like he's like,
yeah.
this is the North Star of how we think, how we operate, and it's just everything. So it's still alive and well in
It is.
military. And by the way, as a business person, I would tell you, like, if you read my code, like it is the master code to winning. Like you want to win, you OODA loop.
It can redefine how you view all things when that recognition is there. And we have a saying, Jocko talked about this, in books that he's read, and this concept of when you know the way broadly, you see it in all things. When you have this overarching understanding, all of a sudden it fits and applies to everything, all things big and small. And the OODA loop is no exception to that. Is when you recognize, oh wow, there's this code, there's this process, there's this way of viewing things. You see the application everywhere, and that's what I was saying. Like, for the $150 or whatever it might be, the implications of that is far beyond, oh, I need to make a better decision for my team in this particular process. It affects everything you do. And the people that really truly embrace that, and to include, being willing to absorb the complexities of it, it can really change your point of view on all things. And our viewpoint of the OODA loop and the decision making, what we call the leadership loop, really affects, and I mean everything that we do. It can be a real game changer for people. It doesn't surprise me. He's um he's a real fanatic about that because it's true. It applies everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So let's kind of change directions a little bit. And I turned 61 this year. I started a nonprofit last year called First Home IQ. I have a real passion for seeing the next generation get into homeownership younger. Like every year, I think the average age of a homeowner now or first time home buyer is like 38. Last year, and it's in their 40s. And so First Home IQ is all about getting to Gen Z and getting them to, in a scrappy way, whether it's house hack, whether it's down payment assistance, get into home younger. And I think part of why I was so passionate about writing this book is I feel like if someone could start documenting their code younger and faster, like don't just like the book is gonna know your code, live your code, share your code. And
Yeah,
so I'm trying to get some content in this book around like why write your code out? Why document your code? You've authored a book. I can just tell you're a guy that is living an intentional life, documenting code. Why is putting pen to paper or keyboard to document? Why is it important to document and know your code? Like, what's your why?
that's a great question. First, you don't look a day over 60, so congratulations, you're doing great. Um, we talked a little bit earlier about, I think I revealed to you, it's really hard to write a book, or at least I should say it was really hard for me to write a book. And what I recognize is the things that you think about in your head really are clear to you. It may, if you think about something in your own mind, it makes sense. Getting that out of your head and onto paper is a whole different story. And so, one thing I think is really valuable about why people should think about just writing things down, you don't have to write a book, but just writing things down, is it really helps clarify your understanding. Because while it may make sense in your head, if you can't articulate it on paper or even verbally, that means you got a little more work to do to truly understand what you're thinking about. But I also live by something, and I don't know if you'd call it a code, but Jocko also shared this with me, is if you have information and knowledge and experience that can help other people live a better life, it is a mortal sin not to share that. And there was almost what really came down to like almost an obligation of to reflect back on my 23 years in the Marine Corps and then 8 years since then as a father, as a husband, as a business leader, and certainly in my military experiences. I learned some hard lessons. I made some big mistakes. I tripped up along the way. I had some memorable failures that really shaped and defined my career, both professionally and personally, that I apply to help make my life intentional and better. And if I don't share that, I am committing a sin because that means the opportunity for someone else to learn from my experience is diminished if I don't do that work. And so I really felt this necessity of taking those lessons and delivering them and packaging them in a way that can be digestible and relatable to other people that might not have had my same. You don't have to be in the Marine Corps for this book to matter to you. I talk about my personal life. I talk about my life with my wife and my kids. I certainly talk about my military experiences. But ultimately, there was an obligation of you've got to share those lessons. And if it helps someone navigate them, those same murky waters that we went through, a little bit better, or avoid them altogether, even better. And you brought up another point. I apologize for going long on this, but the sooner and earlier in someone's life they can start to apply these leadership principles, the better. Because most of what I look back on and go, man, if I had read Extreme Ownership at 21, I'd be so much better off. And there's this opportunity to help expose people younger and younger to things that really impacted me can possibly make their lives better, and learning those lessons sooner. There's an obligation that, and I think you're doing that same thing, Dave. You're trying to help people understand and absorb components that will make their lives better earlier in their life. And I'm really hopeful this book might do that. But I had this sense of obligation that really was a burden that Jocko placed on me. Like, hey man, if you don't get this out there, you're not fulfilling your responsibilities. You've got to share this. And that was the impetus of that.
Well, I can't wait to read the book. And this last question I'm going to ask you,
Yeah.
because they're not going to get the book for a long time. Like what is it, October? It's coming
It
out.
comes out in October
So
21st.
so we got to
It's
wait
gonna
a
be
few
while.
months, wait a few months for that. But I want to close out and think of the people that are watching this. They're mortgage professionals.
Yeah.
And if you are in the mortgage business, it hasn't been a recession, it's been a depression. They
Gosh.
went from, just this ridiculous marketplace. The COVID bubble put interest rates at 2%. Everybody in America either bought a house or refinanced a house. I mean, an exaggeration to make a point. And now, rates are staying higher longer. And there is struggle. Now, here's the deal, because I interview top producers every week, and there are
Mhm.
people that are killing it. And I always feel like it's a mindset. Like they're not in the following the economy and interest rate market. They're following the activity and best practice market. But let's assume that 70% of the people that watch this they're just not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
They probably know what to do, but they're just not doing it. And then there are people on this call right now that they're kicking ass, but they could be better leaders
Yeah.
to people around them. What are some principles that come to mind or some leadership that just comes off
Yeah.
that might be
You're asking
useful to these group?
these are such good questions. And you could almost talk, I mean, literally you could talk for hours on these things. I think what came to mind as you were describing, despite, and you clearly know this infinitely better than I do, but it's obvious even to someone like me, major institutional headwinds. This is a really tough environment. And that is something that I'm certainly sympathetic towards, even though I don't have the context that you all have. But to your point is that there are still people not just surviving, but thriving within that. And I think what they're doing is, despite all these external factors that you really don't have control over, is the ones that are being successful, what they're doing is they're taking ownership. They're just taking ownership. It's as simple as that. They're looking around and saying, okay, listen, I know you don't set interest rates. Okay, but if there's a way to navigate within that environment, that's what ownership is. It's how do you respond to the environment that you are operating in? And you take ownership of everything you possibly can. And I think one of the major differentiators is the willingness to take ownership when all things, especially inside your ego, is telling you, hey, this isn't your fault. There's nothing you can do about it. You have no control. You can't be blamed for this. This is just an external force being imposed on you. The sad part about that is even if there's truth to that, is it doesn't help you. And the ones that are doing well, the ones that are thriving or navigating through this are the ones taking ownership. And the second thought I'll have, and like I said, I'm trying to be succinct because obviously we could talk about this for days, is they're leading their way through this. They're taking ownership and they're leading. And that's really the recipe for success, no matter what the environment. And I got news for you. And I'm sure this ebbs and flows. There are times where the environment is fantastic in this segment. And the ones that are going to be the most successful are still the ones that take ownership and lead. And that is a universal recipe to find success despite all the things that are going on. Because what we know is people are always facing challenges, always in their lives, personally, professionally, otherwise. There's always hardships people are dealing with. And the best way to navigate through that hardship is to take ownership of what's going on and lead your way through it. And
That
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 sounds like what
was
your people are doing.
that was good. By the way, I thought that was going to be my last question, but then I just thought of another one
Hit
because
me.
one of my, again, Jocko's got a lot of great podcasts. So,
He
and if you
does.
do not follow Jocko, you should. But I can't remember the exact title, but it comes from this book. It was Striving to Become the Eminently Qualified Human. And it was before this book came out with, which, by the way, by Jocko with Dave Burke. Check it
Yeah.
out, guys. This is on Amazon. We will have a link down below. And I going from memory, I'm almost 100% positive that I did a podcast and it was titled "Be an Eminently Qualified Human," and I think Andrew Paul may have joined that. So Andrew, I think he actually joined that podcast, and we just kind of unpacked. It was before this book was out, but I would love you to just close out on, what does it mean to be an eminently qualified human? And I just think there'd be some closing thoughts after that.
You bet. Well, I guess that's our second shout out to Andrew. So, Andrew Paul, shout out to you, man. Jocko did that podcast, and I think he called me right after, and he's like, "Hey, man, I want to talk to you about this concept of what it means to be the eminently qualified human being." And really, what it came from is in the military, we have these performance review processes, and there's like a ranking structure, and there's the attributes that you can measure and how the person is doing in their particular role. And Jocko and I, as in the Navy and the Marine Corps, had a bunch of filled out on us, and we filled out a bunch on other people. And it was interesting because there was this very clear codification of what determines how well a person is performing in a measurable attribute, and it's codified. And the highest ranking you can get in this, there's a Marine Corps evaluation thing called a fitness report. The very top of that, the best person, if you want to call it that, is what they call the eminently qualified Marine. And the point behind that is it had descriptions and behaviors and actions and components to achieve that, which meant that even if you weren't, and none of us are really eminently qualified, it's more of something you're striving towards than something you become, is we knew what to do. We knew what the Marine Corps was looking for. We knew what steps to take. We knew how to improve ourselves. We knew what mattered and what didn't. And he realized like we didn't really have that for just us as human beings. And he wanted to help people understand that if you want to get better at anything, it doesn't matter what it is. And if you looked at that, we cover everything from fitness and diet and health and exercise and behaviors in your actions with your kids and with your spouses and with your work. We cover, the code covers all sorts of different things. Is you have to have an ability to measure, are you doing things that contribute to your growth to achieve that descriptor of being eminently qualified. And because that didn't exist, he felt this compulsion to help craft, and to use your word, to codify those behaviors and then measure whether or not you're doing it. And every day you're either moving forward on that path to becoming more eminently qualified, or you're moving away from it. If you want to be more physically fit, which you should, every day you exercise, you're moving towards that, and every day you don't, you're moving away from it. And we have to be honest and open and objective to that. And so that book that he and I worked on really closely together came from the ideas, the military does this all the time. Why don't we just as people have that? And that was our objective, to try to codify the behaviors and actions and the measurements to determine, are you improving in these things in life?
Well, I love that. And guys, my take for you is one, go and listen to that podcast. I think the interview I did, it was called Set the Standard with Andrew Paul. It was 6 years ago. So guys, we've given you a lot to think about. If you are a manager, this would make for some content at your next sales meeting. You know, you don't need to like play our entire, what is it, 35-minute podcast, but maybe like pick 5, 6 minutes out of this and use it as a supplement. If you have not previously known what the OODA Loop is, Google it. And better yet, throw it into AI, you know, throw it into Perplexity and have a conversation with it. You know, you want to really nerd out on this, sign up for that 45-minute training from Dave Berke. I know I'm going to do that after this. Dave, any closing thoughts for folks? Anything you want to make sure they heard? What's the best social media place to follow you? You know, how do we stay in touch? Any closing thoughts?
First, just thanks for having me, man. What you're doing, it's so fun how closely aligned our goals are, even though we're in on paper like very different segments in the world. And I love the connection to the things that Jocko and Leif created with Extreme Ownership. You want to find me, it's super easy. I mean, echelonfront.com is our company and website. You can find me there. I'm pretty active on like Instagram and LinkedIn are the two big ones, and I'm pretty sure it's like David R. Burke or David Burke. My last name is Berke, which is a little bit confusing. But you could also just like straight up just Google me, and there's enough of me out there. And it's mostly tethered to what we're doing at Echelon Front. And so I love when people reach out. People reach out all the time, which is super cool because I think there's this ecosystem of folks that recognize the principles of extreme ownership, the foundational elements we teach at Echelon Front really are universal and they apply. I don't care what business you're in or what sector you operate in, they really are universal. And so if you want to talk about it, try to find me and I'd be thrilled to do that. It's what we do. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody, you know, as a human, you need to be an eminently qualified human, and you need to be the best human you can be to AI proof yourself, to future proof yourself. But you also need to use AI to be better. So actually, like describe Dave Burke in AI, see what comes up. Say what has he taught on OODA Loop, or maybe there was some other concept. But interact with it, get smart, guys. Hope you're getting value. If you do not already like this YouTube channel, subscribe today. And thank you, David. This is awesome. Appreciate you.
Good being here, man. Thank you.
All right, take care, brother.